this one, which is not from Sleeping Beauty, but from Black Cauldron, has some really awesome perspective cues in it. You get this stairway that's coming up and the perspective heading down. And on all of these, we're kind of looking down in the perspective, but it's using not only kind of weird vanishing points, so I think it's possible that a lot of this even shares the same vanishing point. But because of the objects that are being thrown in the foreground and their the lighting, the way that they're casting the lighting sideways across the wall and stuff like that, it creates this very confusing sense to it. And it's great for, it does exactly the right thing. Yeah, I should have known that was Black Cauldron because of him. Anyway, so this is great for horror or for things where you're trying to create a great sense of unease. If you're trying to give somebody that down the rabbit hole feeling, this ambiguous space might be a great way to go, at least for a couple of shots. Okay, so now that you have all that information, which you're going to have to parse through that information because some of these things will be true for your piece and some of them will not. You're going to have to pick which things you feel are really important. Some of you may be wanting to go with a flat space scene and then a path is out the window. Now it's all about the stage and framing and stuff like that, right? But you have one other decision that you have to make, and that is, what type of shot do I need to show? And so I did my thing where I make up names for things that aren't really real names. And I'm sorry, but this is one of the problems. So I'm noticing as I'm trying to write my lighting book also that there are so many things that don't have a name, that they don't have, it just isn't a way to talk about it.
That's why the book will be special though.
Yeah.
You'll finally...
Yeah, so I'm going to define them. I'm going to say this is what this is. And I may be wrong. And yeah, hopefully the entire world will buy it and then they'll start using that term and then we'll have a term for it.
You'll be the next Andrew Lunas.
Either that or what's going to happen is I'm going to release the book and then find out 5 years later, there was a term for that. I just didn't know what it was, but oh well. That's happened before.
Second edition, there you go.
Yeah, second edition. Perfect.
They'll have to buy it twice.
Okay, so the first one I'm calling the establishing shot, and this is kind of the typical thing from a movie, the exterior establishing shot. It doesn't necessarily have to be a far distant thing. It can be something like that. But this is where you're trying to show what this location is and tell us a little bit about it, but without getting very close. You're not showing the action that's happening inside it. It's more of a, by the way, we're here now, right? So a scene layout shot is where you're trying to, this is kind of in between, before you've gotten to the action, this is when you're like panning down the street of the town and you're showing the people like doing their thing and stuff like that. It's basically still technically an establishing shot, but you're actually like trying to get into the action and, get a sense of this huge amount of interest and other things that are happening. Or it may be, it could be something like this where it's a path, but there's just lots of information. You're getting a lot of like depth cues and, you're trying to show basically as much of this world as you possibly can. Here's another example of that. We're just getting, a little bit of this establishing shot feeling, a little bit more of the other stuff. You just get the sense that we're in this forest and it's in the city. The city in the middle of the forest and there's spaceships and so forth. That's Todd Harris. That's from Hunchback of Notre Dame. This, I think, is that same Chinese artist that I forgot his name. It's something like Jing Zhuangji or something. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but that's Dussault again. Who is that? Armand Serrano. And this is Nathan Fowkes. So a stage shot or a staging shot is one where you're trying to show this is where the action is going to happen. So this is showing a specific location from the perspective that we would be seeing it happen, right? So this is where the two people would be talking to each other. I know that some of these, from a technical standpoint, would still be establishing shots, like this one outside the building. But, you could actually have a conversation be happening here in this scene, and it would be natural. It would feel okay, right? Then there's the framed Vista shot. And this is a combination of the establishing shot that I said at first, where you're seeing something from a distance, and some foreground element. What's nice about this is that you're able to tell us a little bit more about the details and life of this world and give us a bigger picture thing, both in the same shot, right? But they're kind of distinct and separated. It's not really about this. It's about this, but this gives us a little bit more information, right?
Who did the Croods art? That's not Nathan Thought.
This is Leighton Hickman. And so this is a difference between the scene layout shot and a framed vista, right? So in the framed vista, we get this a little bit and this glimpse of something going behind, whereas the scene layout is going to show us everything, right? They're trying to show as much of the world as possible, just in case you're foggy on the difference between those two. And then there's the character shot. So character shot is about a thing. There's one thing that this is all about, and that's what your entire frame is. In this case, it's about this tree. And I think that this piece, I forget what the name of it is, but it's the name of the tree, right? And it's not really about any of the details of the scene. There may even be a vista of sorts in this. We can see back into the forest here, or we can see the mountains around it, but those are all an afterthought. It's really about this character, and it's not really about the details of this castle either. I think this is Luc de Machelier, and the details of the castle are nice, but they're really just there to support the character of the castle, right? I think this is actually from Hotel Transylvania, so that would be a hotel, not a castle. Or a castle that is a hotel. So, which of these do you want to do? And I'm going to leave that decision up to you, but I'm going to make some recommendations. So if there is one thing in the world that you really want to show, and it's more the idea of that thing than anything else, then I would do either the establishing shot or the character shot, right? If you just can't show that one thing without giving somebody a street level, get a feeling of now you're down amongst it and you can see what these trees look like up close, but wow, there's this giant mountain vista. Do this, the framed vista, okay? I think a stage shot is fine. Keep it limited if you're going to do that. Do not do a scene layout. There's not enough time for it. It would be an awesome concept piece to show in your portfolio. Don't do it. Maybe when you have 3 months to work on it or something, go for it, but not for this class, okay? Any questions? Yes, Manny.
Question. So, don't do scene layout because it's too complicated. In a studio environment, if you were going to do a scene layout for a game, how long would you get to do it?
So the shots that I've done like that have been anywhere from 2 weeks. I would say a week and a half to 3 weeks is what you get for something like that. I have no idea what these artists got, though. I mean, when I look at that piece, this one here, this one was actually a background for the movie, so it was able to get probably a lot more time. Now you wouldn't be painting the backgrounds as often. Most of the time it's going to be built in 3D. So you'd be just doing a shot like this. And I imagine this artist, even though he got the lines from someone else, somebody had done the drawing for him, he probably spent quite a bit of time on that piece. I would be surprised if it was less than a couple weeks. So, did Jake Parker do the lines for this one? I know he did a lot of the lines for this, but that's cool. That answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
very well.
Any other questions?
I
Yes,
had a
Ryan.
question about like the space, the different levels of space. Would you say a lot of it has to do with the horizon line?
It has to do with the style of the film or game or whatever that you're trying to do more than anything else. So, yeah, if you were doing a game and you wanted to do it in limited space, then you would probably try to move the horizon line down, or you would try to arrange the landmarks or hills or mountains or whatever so that you are not getting the aerial perspective thing, you are getting a compression of those things. So, yeah, the horizon line is one of the things you will play with in that. Any other questions? Okay, so unless there's anything else on this, let's just talk really quickly about how do you approach doing an environment. And so I'm going to just use really rough sketching stuff here, almost like thumbnails, and I'm just going to show how I would approach thinking through the problems to design an environment. So the first thing I would do is I would write. I would just write down the stuff that I knew about that environment, the place where it was going to be, and try and figure out, are there juxtapositions that I need? I would write at the top of the page my theme, say, this is my theme, circle it, or whatever, right? And then once you feel like you know enough about that thing that you could say, from the information that you have, if you were assigned to do, the details around the windows, you would kind of know naturally what to do with them. That's kind of what level of writing you would need to do. Now, I'm not saying that you have to write an essay. These could be like quick little shorthand notes. It's for you to understand. This is something that a lot of, I don't think that everybody is going to work this way. In fact, I know there are a lot of writers that they like to let things kind of grow and evolve naturally. But I want you to have the experience of doing it. I think it's a useful exercise to find out if you are a person who likes to be an architect and figure out how it all frames together first. And I'm not going to put any limitations on this. So if you wanted to be more loose and easy going with it, just do it in the way that you feel right about. Basically, your brainstorm shouldn't be sitting in front of a blank page. It should be, probably first of all, writing down any initial ideas that you have. And then when your initial ideas prove to not be enough, or when you're done with those initial ideas, look at reference. Gather as many things that are like the thing that you are doing as possible. And Andrew asked this question earlier when we had this thing paused, so let's bring it up again. How exactly did you ask?
I was asking how do you go about gathering reference for an environment? Whether if you're doing a sci-fi, if you go get something from Tron or Blade Runner.
Right.
And you were saying to go towards mood instead of specifics.
Yeah, so my answer would be look at the theme you're trying to do, or the character of the environment, or the emotion, the mood and kind of general feeling that you want it to project, and find things that have that mood. I mean, if you're doing a futuristic city, but you want to have something that has this feeling of just being bustling and full of life and energy, maybe you should look at pictures of rainforests. See if there's anything in there that you can use. You could look at ant colonies. You can look at, just look at things that do that and that have that feeling, that energy to them, and apply that, right? Which, speaking of energy, I didn't talk about this when we were talking about flow and movement in lines, that this is also going to be something that's going to apply to your brush strokes. So the way that you use your brush strokes will be, a lot of times, to support the flow of your piece, the flow of parts of your piece as well. So, especially when you're painting in stuff like the sky in the background, rather than just hashing stuff in from every angle, think of the energy that you're trying to project through that image and use brush strokes that do that for those portions, right? Obviously, that's not going to apply to the tightly noodled out, stuff in the corner, but any loose stuff should have energy to it and be supporting the feeling and mood that you're trying to go for, right? So for the Peter and the Leviathan idea that I've been working on, I had this idea. So my theme for that is that, if I can remember it correctly, is that optimism is good, but it should be tempered with like wisdom or carefulness, right? And so I don't remember which it was, but something like that. It's close enough. I don't think the tempering part I figured out exactly what that means in terms of visuals yet, but all of the visual themes that come out of that and all of the story ideas that came out of that are playing off of these ideas of experience and pessimism and optimism and inexperience, and how all of these things kind of play off of each other. And so, the story happens under the sea, and, it's kind of like the cataclysmic, the world gets taken over by the oceans type of idea, or the people have to retreat to the oceans, but then they flourish down there. That it's this futuristic, semi-futuristic world where everybody's living under there. And so they've got this city that they're building. I haven't decided what I was going to call it yet, but it's like this is the symbol of humanity's hope. That like we're going to conquer the oceans and we're going to make humans great again and everything like that. This like unburnished, or this, I don't know if burnished is the right word I was looking for, but unfettered optimism. They're going for it all the way. They're putting everything into it, and it's going to be this icon, right? And that in doing that, they stirred up this dark menace from down on the ocean, down in the chasms, and it came up and destroyed the city. And so Peter, as he's growing up, sees the ruins of this city every day, and he's of course curious about it. He wants to know more about it, and his grandfather does not want him to find out what happened in the past, because that's what caused this problem, right? And so this story, I'll probably try and find some part of this, some location in the world, and I'm thinking of doing the city and Peter's cottage, right? And so the first thing that I would do is I would try to think in terms of, okay, how can I show the city and Peter's cottage at once? And I probably don't want to do the full scene, right? I want to do a framed vista. And so my first attempt is going to be to try to fit both things into the image. And it's usually best to use just big shapes. That's a terrible brush, so I'm not going to use it. We'll just use something that's got kind of a big, wide swath to it. I don't have the brush that I want here, unfortunately, so what do? I'll use this brush. That'll do it. I just want something that's got a little bit of an edge and can cover a large area quickly, right? So I'm going to try compositions where, I can fit in the general shape. That brush is too slow. I guess everything's slow right now because I've got this stuff, so much stuff open right now. So we'll close some of this down and see if that makes it better. All right. That's actually a little bit better. And I think it's okay to go flat and graphic at first. You don't have to be worrying about the perspective up front. Just try and go for something that has an iconic feel to it. So this would be my foreground element, and then I'll probably have the city rising somewhere in the background here, right? And then there will be some kind of barrier in between. So I'm thinking thematically, symbolically right now, almost more than anything else. And I don't know what exactly these things are, so I'm just tossing in shapes to see how that pans out. And my first instinct is that this is the wrong way to go because I want the first read of the image to be Peter's cottage and then the second read to be the city, so that you get the feeling, or you get a look at his existence and what that life is like, and then it's almost more like an afterthought, or this distant hope or something, and not like the first most important thing in the world, right? So for that reason, we know that people read generally left to right, top to bottom, right? It's going to be different in Asia or other places of the world, but around here we can pretty safely assume that. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to block off this whole area of the world where Peter's cottage is going to be. And I'll put the barrier in here. And then somewhere, maybe even a little bit more distant, we'll have that city, right? And now I can make it so that Peter's cottage is a little bit more of a big element here.